But I want to tell you, from the 22 years that I've been teaching, 15 of them have been in the secular colleges and universities, and they have great success with their worldview programs. Their success is strong because they have a model. They have all the same vocabulary. We have it, from our side, we think about CRT, and we think of LGBTQ, and we have all these letters that we know. But all of that is actually quite helpful to them in being able to speak the same language no matter what class the student is in. I do this thing, I won't do it here. I do this thing and when I go to some other conferences where I pretend I'm a secular professor, and I have to do this acting thing. And so I will not do that, especially with who's sitting in the front row. I don't want to be judged. But I pretend I'm the secular professor, and I go through all this thing where this intro to physics class, and I say, that we live in a world where no one agrees on anything, but in physics we have math, and everyone can agree on math. And then I ask, who in the room is religious, and I tell them ahead of time they have to raise their hand, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. And so I have people raise their hand. I say, okay, well, if you're religious, you know what it's like. You have a text, and people disagree on the text, so you have a bunch of denominations, and people, argue about all this sort of stuff. But in physics, we have math. So I go through this whole thing, and then I give them some sophistication about quantum field theory and general relativity and how they don't quite work together very well. But from that, through the math, they've learned that there might be something prior to space-time, which is really amazing because everyone thought space-time was the platform upon which all physics worked. But then they find there might be something prior to that. And what they found is prior to space-time, or at least what they believe in a lot of the journals right now, is that what's prior is consciousness. And so then I say, of course, the religious people think, well, I know what that is. That's God. And then I say it might be God and all that sort of stuff. But we know that if you agree with all of the math we've just done, you can't keep the first 2 chapters of your Bible because that's crazy. Because the first 2 chapters of your Bible really are problematic to the kind of sophistication I just handed you. And so, but it's not a problem because, myth is very important in religion. And myth helps us understand our faith. And myth gives us some of the tools we need to understand our God. And so even though those first 2 chapters might be myth, they're actually quite helpful. And so then I go into, then I end the little thing. And I tell them what steps I took them through. Now I do all this because what I want to show them, these are techniques I've learned from my colleagues, that with their model, they have strategies to get to the students. Because if you've seen the movie God Is Not Dead, how many bore through that? Be honest. It's okay. Bless your hearts. All right. Yeah, so that movie kind of shows this Christian kid, and he goes into a secular classroom, and the professor's all mean. He's like, who in here is a Christian? And the kid's like, I'm a Christian. He's like, I'm going to get you and your little dog too. And you're like, no. And they go down you've got to have seen this, the whole thing. And so at the end, the kid, says this big speech on free will, and the professor's like, oh, free will? I've got a PhD. I never heard of such a thing. And so the kid throws water on him, and then he melts into the ground. You guys have seen the movie. And I can tell you, I think probably life would be a lot easier for Christian kids if that's how it actually went, because on the first day you would know where you stand. But none of my colleagues acted like that, that I was aware of. In fact, they loved Christian kids in their class because they saw Christian kids the way many of us see foster kids, as abused by a system that is holding them back, and you have an opportunity to reach them. Most of my colleagues were evangelicals. They were secular evangelicals, but evangelicals nonetheless. They wanted to reach those kids. And so they take them through this strategy, which is basically, you begin with acceptance. You get the ugly thing out of the way. Who in here is religious? They do that on purpose because they want to get it out of the way so the kid feels that they're accepted. And when they raise their hand, yeah, I'm religious, the first thing they say is, that's awesome. We live in a very cynical world, and for you to hold on to your faith is amazing. That's cool. And they immediately feel accepted. The next step is separation, where you say, it's awesome that you have your faith, but now we're going to talk about X. Once they can separate their faith and from the classroom, even though it's okay to have your faith, the classroom becomes our sacred space where we can talk about reality, what's real. And physics is real. Faith is awesome, it's cute, but now we're going to talk about what's real. And that's how the students start thinking in those terms. And once separation happens, then they give them the gift of something sophisticated. And each of you know what that's like when you give a student something sophisticated. Something that they couldn't have understood before, but now you have packaged it in a way that they get it. And when you do that kind of an exchange, there is something very important that happens, especially with young kids who identify themselves with their intelligence. I was someone that came from a family where I was the dumb one. And that's just the way it was. I was a terrible reader. I think I told you about this before with dyslexia, and back in the 80s, they just called it slow. It was a different term. And so I was just a dumb one, and I accepted that. It's half the reason I joined the Army. I thought, well, I don't go to college because I'm not one of the smart ones, so I'll join the Army, and if I feel like going to college after that, I'll do it. And I'll tell you, when you're in a classroom and a professor packages a very complex idea in a way that you get it, these young people start thinking of themselves differently. Their identity changes. I go from the dumb one in my family to maybe I am smart. Maybe this is who I am. And when you give them that, they hold on to it with everything they got. So that when towards the end of the semester, all you have to do is show them that in reality, if you want to hold on to that sophistication I gave you, all you have to do is just deny a part of your faith. Just a part. Just the first 2 chapters. All you lose is Adam. Not a big deal. But it is a big deal if you believe in the second Adam. And so I go through all that to tell you that a model is very helpful for unity, to help all the students see the same direction. There's a reason why whenever I do that seminar, that faculty come up to me afterwards with tears in their eyes saying, my kid went to a secular school and he has walked away from the faith. And I know it doesn't have, it's not just going to a secular school, and it's not a sin to go to secular school. I hope not, because 90% of us would be in trouble. I would be. But the issue is, have they been prepared for such a thing? Most of them haven't. And what happens is you have parents that lose their kid because of this cycle that is actually quite effective, because the kids are hearing the same things in every class. Everyone has the model, and they almost don't even really need a meeting for it, because everyone's already on board.